Hello, I'm Lisa Wicklman. Welcome to today's session. I'll be joined today by my business partner, Linda Maxwell, and we are delighted to share with you our key findings and insights from our recent attendance at the Consumer Bankers Association live conference in Vegas a couple of weeks ago. Now, those of you that know us will not be surprised that our key insights are all oriented around leadership, as you can see here. The four topics that we've chosen to share with you today: retention, tool adoption, culture, and digital transformation, all have roots in leadership, and we look forward to sharing those insights with you. We'll be covering all four sections, and as we proceed through each of the four sections, we'll have an opportunity for a quick bit of questions at the end. So I'll ask you, if you have any questions, to please note those in the question and answer panel. It's off to the bottom right of your WebEx window, next probably to the chat icon, where there's three little dots. So please do that. And on that note, I will turn it over to my partner, Linda, to kick us off with banker retention.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. So we're going to spend a few minutes on the topic of retention, and fortunately, I was able to actually speak at the conference on this particular topic. So ended up having about 45-50 minutes with a panel. So I felt very fortunate to have a couple of people from Bank of the West, Debbie Hale, Byron Rivera, who are clients of ours, and then Christina Bosna from M&T. So they were able to talk about their experiences as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to review some of the things that I shared that we're seeing out there in the marketplace with banking clients as well as non-banking clients relative to the topic of retention. I will add some of the comments that the panel added as we went through that conversation that particular day. So as we look at some of the topics, I'm going to basically do a quick note of what are some of the trends we're still seeing, what are some of the root causes, but more importantly, what are the solutions that we're seeing working out there. As far as the trends, I know all of us are hoping that this trend of trying to keep our people in the quiet quitting or whatever it is going on right now would have gone away by now, but it's not. The trend is still very much of how do we keep our colleagues, how do we keep our key employees? So what's fueling that trend? A couple of things that we've been seeing. The first one, whether we like it or not, others are going after our people. So there is a trend out there right now where other organizations know that there's a high level of maybe not satisfaction with current environments, so that people are more open and they're taking advantage of that situation, and so are proactively reaching out to our people. So that's going on more than it has in the past, which makes the offers and opportunities more prevalent in their minds, and they are sometimes taking them up on that. Number two is, with all the things that have gone on in the last couple of years, employees are feeling very open, empowered to make choices. A recent study that was done by McKinsey said that about 40% of colleagues out there in the business world are open to and actually considering in the next 12 months looking or leaving their job. That's just a recent statistic, quite high. The third one is an interesting dynamic, which is managers are hesitant to hold their people accountable and really kind of manage performance because of the fear that they might lose them. Lisa and I went with sales management executives and actually did a survey about a couple months ago, and actually did a polling question asking managers, senior leaders, what percentage of your managers do you think are not managing performance or holding people accountable for fear of losing their people? And it was really pretty astounding. We did a couple of studies. One of them came back saying 40% of the managers are not managing performance for that fear. Another study came back and said 60% were not managing their people because of the fear. So those are causing interesting implications, because if managers aren't managing performance, the culture and the performance of the organization begins to deteriorate. And there's a lot of top people who don't want to be in those kinds of environments. So it's actually having a negative impact on culture, which is increasing the interest of high performers in particular to want to move. So those are just some of the trends that are, why is it still around? these are three of the very dominant reasons. So what's the cause? So if they decide that they're going to move, what is the reason behind it? Again, these are just some of the main ones that we're seeing. I'll start with the lack of colleague connection. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that Gallup question, do you have a best friend at work? Well, guess what's been happening to that trend through COVID? The trend is we are having less and less friends at work. Surprise, surprise, because of the work from home, or now even in a hybrid situation. So that lack of human connectivity is directly impacting people's willingness to kind of stay where they are. And quite frankly, if they get asked to leave, they don't feel like they're leaving people because there's a less of that human connection present. Back to the office requirements. Most organizations right now are operating in some kind of hybrid scenario, but the big interesting piece around that one, when you peel back that onion, is it's not so much just the requirements, it's how it gets communicated. So many times when managers are communicating the hybrid model that their organization is implementing, it's about this is what the organization needs, this is what the company needs, this is what will be most effective for the, you kind of get the idea. So people are seeing not the what's in it for them to maybe embrace the hybrid model or whatever model your organization might be using, but instead are only hearing what's in it for the company, which then becomes, again, one of those more reasons that they're open to consider going to alternative places. Big thing in number 3, which is more and more colleagues, and I'll talk more about this in a moment, really want to learn and grow and be set up for success. And through all the changes that have been going on out there, colleagues are feeling less supported, less set up for success, which then has them again be more open to exploring what other possibilities might be out there. Number 4, many managers are thinking that they can't do something about this retention issue. Now, what that means is if they have that belief system, they're not doing the things that they really could be doing that would positively impact retaining their people. So it's that belief that's in essence holding them back. And the last one, it is what it is. Yes, there is increased compensation out there, and some of it is pretty crazy, that is taking people away. We're not going to talk about that one much. It is what it is, but we got to acknowledge that it is present out there. Okay, so that's all the bad news. So let's talk about what can you do about it? Oh, there's one more thing. I've added this piece just based on one of the presentations I sat through. It was kind of a couple new things that we hadn't really been seeing and hearing, but when I saw the data, it was pretty compelling. So Qualtrics actually presented as well on the topic. And what they were doing is they were talking about what else is impacting retention. A couple of things, and this is related to more the employee engagement more than anything else. So these, they said, were some of the 4 biggest trends that they were seeing relative to employee engagement, which obviously directly impacts their desire to stay. So some of the trends were employees reclaiming their boundaries. In other words, employees saying, no, these are the hours in which I'm going to work. No, I'm not going to work on these particular. So in essence, kind of trying to put some normality to and predictability to their workday. So that's going on. The burnout question there, interestingly enough, is so many of the colleagues, employees are saying, I'm having to work in different situations. In other words, maybe remote, but maybe when I went back to the office, my old office wasn't there anymore. So now I have a new environment, but you haven't given me the tools. You haven't given me the tools or the processes which enable me to be productive in the environment in which you're expecting me to work. Hence, I'm burning out. So that's where that one was. It was more the tools and the processes haven't caught up with what we're asking the people to potentially do in the new environment. The third one, no surprise there, is people really do want to feel that what they do matters. So what's the purpose of kind of our group, my role, that kind of thing, as well as how are you helping me develop? So that continues to be a trend. The one that was interesting to Lisa and myself that we heard for the first time, the new priority list for the employees. One of the things that's really coming on strong, and that's what you see is the picture I took in the right-hand corner, is colleagues want to work for management that knows what they're doing. So in other words, they really do care about, do you know, as a senior management team, do you know where we're going? Do you know what the roadmap is to help us get there? And that clarity from the management team gives them comfort, gives them confidence that they should actually stay. So this was a trend that Qualtrics really talked quite a bit about, and that's why they call it new. It is more important than ever as colleagues are making their decision to stay. Do I feel like my organization is on a good track? Do I feel like management knows where we're going and has a roadmap to get us there? And what you see as the percentages there is what percentage of the people say that they would stay for 3 years, 5 years longer if that was really, really clear. So that was something that was new and different, more than we had, say, 3 years ago. So colleagues right now, according to Qualtrics, are looking more longer term. As we were trying to get through COVID, it was what's in front of us that we got to get through. Well, now we're able to pause a moment and say, 1 year, 2 year, do I feel the organization I'm with is going to give me comfort, confidence that I'm in the right place? Okay, and now let's talk about what are some of the solutions that we're seeing out there. And I'm going to talk about two different kinds of solutions, one that are more organizational, in other words, senior management system related, and the rest that are more management related. The ones from an organization, the four that you see, the hybrid options, I'll start with that one. Again, everybody's looking at different ways in which we could help people kind of still have some flexibility, but yet at the same time be connecting with people in the offices. What is working out there is when management is communicating around the what's in it for the colleague to embrace some of the hybrid options, as well as that management is structuring it so that people, when they do come back in, find it of high value and are actually more effective or more efficient or more productive when they're in those office environments. So it's a lot about positioning and engaging the colleague and really thinking through kind of why this is a good idea for them. Career pathing is a big, big deal. Recent study, 35% of the workforce is now millennials. Millennials have at the very top of their list growth, learning and growth. So organizations that are really putting career pathing, even if it's not formalized, informal, as long as the colleagues know how they're being developed and they're seeing evidence and proof of that development really coming about, having a significant positive impact. Third item, relative to onboarding, a lot of organizations have, if they lost people, had to onboard new people. So they've had to do a lot of things to really make sure that the new people are being set up for success as they come on board. And the ones that are really doing that well are looking at it from two angles. One is, yes, how do you, as a new employee, get to know the systems, the processes, the products, whatever it is. And they are making sure that they connect to the people. So they are spending more time and effort in the onboarding, connecting the new colleagues to people. That's really working as a retention strategy. The last one, relative to compensation, what is working? One of the research that came out of a recent study was saying that if the colleague engages with their manager, in other words, they feel like their manager is with them, it takes more than a 20% increase over their current comp for them to potentially be stolen away, is kind of how they were terming it. So yes, we need to be mindful about our compensation being at parity or at least competitive, but they're saying as long as management's really engaged, as long as you're within 20%, you have a good shot. So that's the organizational things. Let me move on to the things that leaders and managers, in other words, I know a lot of you who are on this call right now, so I just want to say hi to all of you, but I know that's not what we're supposed to be doing. So let me just talk about some of the things that many of you on this call right now could be putting into practice. So I'm going to quickly go through 4 things that leaders actually impact. And just a couple of quick things. If you look at studies, and again, this was a recent McKinsey study that was coming out, and they were asking, why did people leave? The number one reason, 62% of the time, it's culture. So really, really high. And then the other 3 reasons were compensation, manager, and work environment. So what's intriguing is the manager actually controls 3 of the 4. So that's why what we're talking about here is so important, because managers do matter and really can drive retention very significantly. So I'm going to spend a few minutes looking at culture, which is what does managers can do for the team. We're going to look at engaging with impact, what does managers can do individually with their people. We're going to look at how managers can play a role in getting other resources within the company to better support the colleagues, because without that support, they're not set up for success. And the last one is really about be a leader. So what are some of the things that we need to do that really have us being kind of on the forefront, motivating our people to kind of stay? So let me go through these, but as I do, you're probably hearing a theme. We like to say, Lisa and I like to say, retention is a contact sport. So it's less an organizational issue from an impact perspective and more of a, how do you as a leader manager really do something about it? So let me look at culture, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that during our little webinar here. But what's interesting about culture, I already mentioned that it's a big, big factor. And one of the biggest factors right now when people are looking at where they're going and looking at why they're staying, what's been intriguing is how managers think that they don't impact it or that they can't make it happen. So reality is that our research and experience is that, yes, you actually can build a culture with intentionality. You can choose the culture and you can make it happen. Now, when you choose the culture you want, it has to start with the managers. They need to be the ones that are actually demonstrating the culture and then beginning to reward and recognize and hold people accountable in essence to that culture. So it really does start with management once the culture that you've chosen has been decided. And it's about sticking with it. It's really about management embracing and owning what it is and then continuing to move it forward. So what we're seeing working out there is organizations that are maybe picking 3 or 4 culture pillars. So it might be performance, it might be accountability, it might be team, and then saying, okay, so if that's the pillars of our culture, what are maybe 3 behaviors that most commonly demonstrate that pillar within our organization, or behaviors that we want people doing that demonstrate it within our organization? Organizations who define the pillars, define the behaviors, and then actually have management start doing it and talking about it are being extremely successful with it. And it is becoming a retention factor. The next item here around leadership, a big trend that we're seeing is being able to engage with your people is really important. It's been important for years, but it's even more important now. And what we're seeing is that managers who are choosing, again, what's the solution? Managers who are choosing to use the lens of, am I having an impact with my people, are having a better opportunity to retain people. What you see in the visual there is it's no longer okay just to be maybe a great coach who can develop your people, or a great leader who can inspire your people, or be a great manager who can focus and hold them accountable. Today's colleagues are really demanding all 3. So what is working out there is organizations and leaders who are saying, you know what, I need to do all 3. I need to be that coach who develops, I need to be the leader who inspires, and I need to be the manager who sets expectations and holds people accountable. So organizations who are mindful and really trying to make sure that their leaders at all levels are doing all 3 are having a positive impact on their colleagues. The third one here, partner, this one real quickly, is when you think about what a leader can impact around retention, your people need internal resources to do the things that are necessary for them, your people, to be successful. Managers can impact that. So what is working out there is when managers know how to productively engage other resources within the organization on their people's behalf. What is working out there is so leaders who are proactively reaching out to others and really making sure that we're taking the time to get aligned on what are we trying to accomplish together, what do we expect of each other, and that we keep the open communication also are having a significant impact. And last but not least, leaders need to be leaders. And what we have been seeing as happening right now is so much has changed in the last 2.5 years with what you have to do as a leader, manager, and coach. Many leaders out there have blind spots. In other words, things that they're not conscious of that are getting in their way of adding impact, or ruts. In other words, things we've been doing for years used to make a difference, but now aren't working. And then mindsets around things I can and can't impact. So what is working out there is organizations, leaders, and managers who are really saying, are there things that we need to do differently than we maybe have in the past? And I can give you lots of different examples. I'll just give you a couple of quick ones. So an example that maybe in order to have maximum impact, I need to be having more communication where the camera is on or in person versus relying on email would be an example. A rut might be, boy, I'm a really good coach, and now I need to maybe pick up and be more effective as a manager and a leader. lots of examples around there around we, in essence, kind of need to sharpen our saws for today's environment compared to where it was. Lots of things that we could say on that. Those were a few of the highlights. What was kind of fun at the end, what they did at CBA is they actually had an artist listening in on the different presentations. And so the artist who was listening in on the presentation I and the panel did, this is what they came back with. So what they were doing is they were trying to capture all the insights from the panel and me, and this is what they ended up coming up with. And it would take a whole hour to kind of explain all those outcomes. But we've got other topics we want to cover here, so I need to wrap this up. So Lisa, did we get any questions while I was sharing this information?
Yeah, thanks, Linda. And I will remind folks to please enter into the Q&A field at the bottom right of your window. We did have a question that came in.
Okay.
Curious as to what do you and the panelists that you presented with, what did they see as the biggest breakthrough relative to retention in 2023?
Okay. Well, that's a really good question. Really simply, it's leader engagement. So many people, I don't care what generation you are, I don't care what role you're playing, is need more human connectivity. And so leaders finding the time and then choosing the right means, like examples, virtual video if you had to, but taking the time to engage the human connection. Just every panel that we were talking to or conversations that we're having, it's the human touch. People are missing the human touch. So the leaders being conscious around how do they do it more frequently and how do they do it in a meaningful way through dialogue was a really big deal.
Great. Thanks, Linda. So let us continue. I'll build this out and we'll continue with our next topic, which is adoption. Adoption, we're talking about the use of tools or processes or programs. And we know that financial institution banks in particular are continuing to invest heavily in technology tools, processes, and programs. And they find, and we continue to hear, that so many of those investments fail to be utilized, which is really problematic for the banks and for the senior executives that we're speaking about. It was very curious. Linda and I, during our numerous one-on-one conversations with a myriad of bank executives during our time in Vegas, the main topic that came up most throughout all of our conversations as we were debriefing, that all came back to themes of adoption. 75 to 80% of those conversations all came back to some sort of a frustration or a concern around adoption and getting my people to utilize these tools, programs, or processes that I'm investing in as executive within my bank. So these were some of the questions that we found posed, and I want to kind of share some of the insights that we shared and that we heard during some of the presentations during CBA Live as well. Questions such as, well, how can I, collapse the time frame to adoption? How can I reduce that snapback? How do I really avoid those tools themselves actually becoming the behavior that we're trying to drive? How do I get full adoption, and why does it really even matter? And how do I ensure that the behaviors are ready? These are, again, just a summation of the themes from the conversations that Linda and I were having, but really we thought were quite interesting. And so I want to jump in first off to that one at the bottom right. How to really avoid the tools actually becoming the behavior. Thinking of a particular bank executive that we were speaking with, and she was sharing her frustration because what she realized is that from her time going out in the field, so many of the people in the branches have now ended up fixating on a checklist that home office deployed earlier in the year as a resource to help the bankers really stay focused around having very robust, value-added conversations with their clients. A very worthwhile endeavor. But unfortunately, this tool, this checklist that was created, had now become the focus. So much so, she was sharing with us that when some of the district and regional level managers were out meeting with the branch team members, they were almost fearful and they wanted to share. No, I really did all these things on the checklist. So no longer was it about that really important customer conversation, that dialogue, to really uncover their goals, their wants, their needs. It was about, did I cover everything on this checklist? So really unfortunate, and very much a concern for this very senior level executive head of retail in her financial institution. They were focused on doing the checklist versus doing the core behavior that was the reason for the checklist in the first place. That was just one example there. I'll share another one here where it kind of gets to those two of how do I collapse the time frame to adoption, and how do I really reduce any possibility of snapback once we've started that journey. And I sat through the presentation. It was actually a CRM adoption presentation, and two executives from Citizens and Huntington were a part of a panel there. And one of the angles, there's a couple different angles to this one, but one of the angles they were sharing was around, I've categorized it as an organizational approach. And what they were sharing with the audience was really the importance of orchestrating the value. And Mark Rhodes at Huntington shared that they were very mindful on the front end, organizationally, of building out their tool, in this case CRM, in a way so that the bankers would very overtly receive value from any data that was put in. So whenever data was required to be put in, a conscious decision was made on the front end to make sure that the bankers were going to see value from it coming out. So I thought that was really interesting. And then just another example of organizational approach with Citizens Bank. Patrick Christino shared that the core behavior of interdivisional referrals between lines of business, they actually have enabled it through using one of the features, the Slack feature within Salesforce. So again, it's about that behavior, but they orchestrated that behavior organizationally by using the tool. And that was helping them get to adoption a little bit quicker and help reduce some of this potential snapback. On the leadership side, a leadership approach, and you've heard Linda talk about a few of these already, really important to integrate it, embed it within the daily and weekly actions that the managers themselves are taking as they manage, coach, and lead their bankers. And doing that very overtly. So for example, when I'm managing, so during the bank managers one-on-ones, making it a point to only use data during my one-on-ones and reports during my one-on-ones that are coming from the tool, in this case from CRM. So we've all heard the saying, if it's not in CRM, it didn't happen. So avoiding the allowing of any random, rogue Excel spreadsheets during a one-on-one. And from a coaching perspective, the manager really making it a point to role model their own use of the tool when they're engaging with their bankers, so their people see them using it as well. And on the lead side, really celebrating where the managers see colleagues using the tool in their day-to-day tasks, such as really scheduling customer follow-up appointments through the tool versus in a notepad off to the side of their desk or through Outlook. So again, really very intentionally incorporating that into the manager's daily and weekly activities was a couple key takeaways around addressing those two issues with adoption. Another one here I'll share, the question around how do I get to full adoption? This is a biggie, and it really does matter. Linda and I and the team at Business Efficacy have been talking about this one for quite some time. And some of you on this call have heard us talk about the difference between adaption and adoption, that departure once you get beyond that initial behavior and you start to peter out down the adaption side of the equation versus going all the way on up to consistent, effective execution. And we were having a conversation with a bank executive who shared that she is switching from one sales enablement tool to another. And unfortunately, the bankers had never fully adopted the original one that she was moving away from. And the new provider had promised quite significant return on investment for her in making this shift. what we were discussing was that, unfortunately, Linda and I see this a lot. The ROI that is often provided by tool providers and technology providers is based on full adoption, as you see my build off to the right. So that is, I can understand why they're doing that, but what she and I know from doing this for a long time, it's very hard to get to full adoption. Unfortunately, most organizations get stuck somewhere back here between initial execution and effective execution. And therefore, you never will really achieve that tremendous ROI from which your business case for the investment was made. So this is a biggie that really needs to be thought through on the front end. How do I ensure I'm going to get full adoption? Definitely an important piece. And an extension of that was another one of our questions that we were facing was around how do I make sure my people are ready with the behavior? And this was a fascinating conversation between Comerica, Omar Saleh from Comerica, and Matt Thompson from White Clay. And they were talking about this notion of human behavioral readiness. And Linda and I have seen this time and time again as well. We were having another conversation with one of the executives there who was recognizing I'm ready to go. And then actually in this presentation, Mac from the stage even said, as a technology provider, I can be ready. I can be ready to go in a very short period of time to launch this technology. But what I've seen from experience is your people won't be. Their human behavioral component, they won't be ready as fast as I can get ready as your technology partner to be there. And that's a big problem. He went on to share that their experience at White Clay is typically it takes anywhere from 12 to 24 months to really get the human behavioral readiness. Our experience, Linda and I find it's more like 9 to 18 to get there, but it is very intentional and it's something that needs to be thought through on the front end. And you see a very well accepted model. We've got to have the people plus the process to lead to the technology and the data. But these are very real issues that bank executives out there are grappling with. So much so that we actually are doing another webcast on this. So I'll flag this for you now. We will be emailing our client base about this, our banking clients, but we're doing it with Vertical IQ, another resource in the banking community. And we're talking about maximizing tool adoption and performance and really providing some real world tips during a webinar coming up in June. So if this is a hot topic for you, please plan to join in for that one as well. Let me see on this topic of tool adoption. Linda, do we have any questions that have popped up? I'm going to check the.
Yeah, I've got one here, Lisa. It says, what do you do if you've launched your tool, but you didn't do it kind of the right way and you need to start over? Now what?
We see that one a lot, don't we?
We do.
We sure do. Two things. First, I'd say you need to work on the people. You need to go back to, okay, what's the why, what's the with them, what's in it for me, the value that they're going to get from using the tool. Definitely you need to go back and you can't beat that drum loud enough or hard enough. And then the other piece was what I was talking about that Mac and Omar were discussing, the human behavioral readiness component. That's a biggie. Think about what is the core customer behavior that we're trying to get the tool to be applied to. Is it the discovered needs conversation or understanding customer needs to help prepare recommendations, that sort of thing. So think back, what is the core behavior that was at the heart of why we were doing this tool in the first place, and go back and say, you know, how can my people be more effective at executing on that core behavior? Revisit that before you just start pushing harder on the tool.
Okay. Okay, well, let me jump to the next topic here. Lisa and I are trying to cruise through a lot of content. So let me touch a bit on culture. So I touched on it already, but there were numerous presentations. What was intriguing to Lisa and I is culture is something that we've worked on for the last 20 years. I have at Business Efficacy, but it is like at the top of the list in the last couple of years. There were numerous presentations. So I'm going to share some of the insights that came. So one of them, and this was a general session presentation on getting to what's next. You can see the presenters who were there. And so I'm capture some of the highlights. One of them was Tim Welsh. He's the vice chair at US Bank for Consumer and Business Banking. He was talking a lot about culture, and you might wonder about his red tennis shoes. So this is an example of how Tim lives the culture. So they have a culture a lot about team. And so the red tennis shoes became team sports. It was fast, it was agile. So red tennis shoes has become a symbol of culture. So one of the things that Tim was really trying to reinforce is once you declare your culture, whatever it is, and let's just say it's team is a predominant theme, and the behaviors underneath it are defined like agile and fast and together. What Tim was reinforcing, if you have a symbol that goes along with that pillar and those behaviors, it catches on faster. So he was wearing his red tennis shoes everywhere he went. So interesting. Some of the key things that the panel talked about, I'll just reinforce real quickly. Make the essence of the culture simple. In other words, they have to be able to easily embrace, understand, and then do something with it. So Tim was obviously an example of team. Brant was talking about, from Huntington, was talking about welcome to Huntington. So a core part of their culture is a welcome and an embrace, and you're all a part. So the welcome to Huntington has become a really big deal, but that's kept it simple. So that is a core part of their culture that has been enabled because of the simplicity. The second one was about culture. We need to bring pride back into banking. So what they were debating amongst themselves is how do we build that into the culture? So the organizations who are accelerating culture in banking are making sure that the pillars they're coming up with that are part of their culture have something to do with pride, that what we do matters. And so how we articulate that as a part of the culture and the why we do what we do as a part of our culture was really an accelerator factor and even an attraction factor. And the last point is lots of conversation about everybody needs to own it. It's not just at the top, it's not just at the bottom, it's every single level, every single function, every single colleague. And that as leaders who really are trying to make culture happen, we need to be figuring out how it's this inclusive component as we go about doing it. Another topic, and that was also brought up, and this one was culture. It's build, sustain, and leverage. This one, interestingly, was primarily Tim. So Tim was talking about what are some of the key things that he's seen work at his level and at other organizations, but also that they're really doing a lot at US Bank. It starts with purpose. So again, this is kind of that connection to what's the bigger reason this is a part of our culture, or why is it we're creating this culture? So it has to be something bigger than just us or just a benefit to the company. So something that's more compelling, so to speak. He talked a lot about culture augmentation. In other words, how do we spread it out? So it's not just launch it and then start working on it, but how are we always looking for new and different ways to apply it? So many times when culture gets launched, it's here's how we're going to start doing it. And it's a very narrow set of behaviors. But what people need to be thinking about is how would you do this? How would you do this behavior in more and more different applications and situations? And so it's about growing it. And he used the word augmentation. How do we make it go bigger? And it really is, we got to use it more frequently in different kind of scenarios. The third one, listen to the voice. There was a lot of conversation about we need to be listening more. If there was a theme that I think Lisa and I heard, it's about that human connection. That human connection requires empathy, and it requires that we listen. And so that was a core theme, both in what Tim was talking about, but it was also in the other group as well. In order for us really to embrace and grow our culture, we need to make sure that we're listening. And the component that was mentioned quite frequently as well is we need to, when we listen, respond to whatever it was they were talking about. So a couple things just kind of on what we've seen. I already shared that yes, you can build culture and what it looks like. Most common things that we're seeing, I just wanted to fly through these really quickly. I call them kind of the conference conversation insights. The most common cultures people were trying to create, those are the three. We want a performance culture, or we want an accountability culture, or we want a team. So part of what you have to do is you have to decide what kind of a culture do you want? those were the three most common ones that I was hearing as I was out talking to people. What are some things about starting with management? The need for managers to be conscious of, it starts with you, and how fast you go on embracing and demonstrating it is how fast the rest of the group is going to go. You know, the pace of the team is the pace of the leader. So lots of conversation around that. Lots of conversations around, we can't forget the middle management group. So frequently we think about, oh, we're going to kick it off at the senior level, and then we're going to make sure that the colleagues on the front line are doing it. But we forget middle management. So some of the what's working out there is when they were really embracing the how do we get every single level of the organization fully engaged over the long haul, and taking ownership. Ownership, as an example, is when a manager is talking about it and really believes what they're talking about relative to culture. Doesn't work when they're saying it, but they really don't believe it. So how do you make sure that you're creating ownership as you go through this? And the last one on how to really keep it going. Again, I've got so many stories that we could share, but don't have time right now. You have to deal with the people who are anti-culture. So not let that grow and slow the culture down. So what's working out there is dealing with those people, making sure there's more celebration around when people are doing the behaviors that are a part of the culture and recognizing that. And then consistency, lots of things around consistency. To build culture, people have to see the predictability in what you're doing so that it becomes the norm. So the importance of paying attention to, are we being consistent at every single level in what we do? So those are some of the quick highlights. So I'm just going to pause there. Lisa, was there any question that came in? Because I know you want to talk about digital transformation. So if no questions came in, I think we just go right to yours.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Let me just go there for the sake of
You had
time.
some cool things to share about digital transformation. I don't want us to miss.
How can you have a Consumer Banker Association conference these days and not talk about digital transformation?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, everybody on this call would clearly agree with that. I was actually quite surprised. So this is what we all know. We are all immersed in it to some extent. Every single bank out there. And the questions are, you know, is it something that, did we buy it out of the box, or do we create it internally? What does the customer interface look like? We've got tons of people within our financial institutions working to figure this out and have been working on it for the better part of this past decade. But what really caused me to pause is I was intentionally listening for what the executives from the top banks, you know, the ones that have invested multi millions in digital transformation, what to hear them say that they were focusing on. So that's what I really want to share with you. These were the two of the biggest that really caught my attention. And clearly, we would all agree they are trendsetters in digital transformation. But look at what these two executives were talking about. Nikki, the managing director head of digital for Bank of America, she was talking about connection to the emotional heartstrings of our customers. Nothing else matters if we don't make that emotional connection. I just kind of went, whoa, didn't expect to hear that coming from her. And then Jennifer Roberts, one of our closing conference presentations, she was up there talking about, yeah, and you know what, this all comes back to really listening to our people, and that people want to talk to people. People want a human connection. So those really did catch my attention. And hearing all of those, as I was under the topic of digital transformation, hearing so much talk, and Tim Welsh as well from US Bank, about empathy, about be human, that human connection, really the core behavior of active listening, and then do something about it. Linda said it, and then respond, really making that emotional connection. I loved it. Tim Welsh, when he was speaking in one of his numerous times he was speaking, he said, you know, when I'm with a human, I want to have a meaningful connection with that person. He said, see and understand my data. See and understand my data. Acknowledge that you've seen and understand my data, but then especially listen to me and understand my needs, my hopes, and my goals. Human, active listening. That connection, use all the data as well. And I think that's an area where a lot of banks are just missing it. There's a lot of data out there and we know it's there, but we're not really actually connecting it and using it in our connection to really demonstrate to our customers that we're hearing them and that we understand them and that we really do care about them and want to help them. So my big takeaway from this whole notion of digital transformation was absolutely not what I expected going into this conference. And I was specifically looking for this. The big takeaway for me was mastering execution of that human connection. The technology is continuing to happen, and it is a given. It is happening, and in small scale or large scale, depending on your particular bank. So we know everybody's at different points on the spectrum there, but it is happening. And the big opportunity that every single one of us as banks have is to differentiate around that human element and to really, as Tim said, understand my data. So recognize it and understand it, whether you can see a little bit of it or you have full view like Bank of America or Chase have. See it, understand it, make some connections to me, and then really understand my hopes, needs, and goals. So that was a really big aha for me coming out of this one. So Linda, any questions on the digital transformation piece? I know we're just about out of time.
No, and I didn't get a question, and we are out of time. We could be talking about these topics for hours, Lisa.
Oh my gosh, we absolutely could.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to thank everyone who joined us. I know this was our banking community. We really appreciate you. We appreciate you spending some time with us today. Do hope that we will see you in Vegas in March of in DC in March of next year for CBA Live 2024. And Linda and I will be sending out the recording to you as well, so you'll have this for your reference. Thanks for your time, everyone, and your participation. Have a great day. Bye-bye.